Welcome, my Mercurial mercenaries, to episode 2 of TOPYWEN, the only podcast you will ever need, TOPYWEN. I've already got an abbreviated form of saying it because obviously in this day and age our time is valuable and having to say a whole sentence just for the name of a show would be difficult, and you find that people do this, don't they? Like Game of Thrones, they go, oh my god, that's brilliant. Game of Thrones, G-O-T. We can just say got. Did anyone actually do that? Did anyone say got? I must rush home tonight to watch Got? Probably not. But here we are. And episode 2. I said in episode 1 we were going to try and hang each episode on the title of an album. And this one is Passion and Mercurial Warfare. Now, I could also have called it, and I was considering, Surfing with the Mercurial Alien. But we're going to go with Passion and Mercurial Warfare. And any of you in the know will understand that this is probably, I mean, I know it's definitely, but you're thinking it's probably a guitar reference, because Passion and Warfare was Steve Vai's album from around 1990, one of the most kind of over the top in terms of technique and in respect to those solo albums, and it's more of my era than the youth of today, but there was a time in the 80s where guitar players were producing solo albums, the likes of Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Paul Gilbert, Jason Becker, I think, those kind of bands, solo artists rather, and the bands themselves, the bands that they came from, like Racer X, or even your mainstream bands like Whitesnake. These bands had guitar virtuosos. This was an era, the 80s, of kind of glam metal guitar virtuoso bands that were then frowned upon in the grunge era. But for a while there, having massive hair. I mean, I've tried to grow my hair. You can't see because this is a podcast. I've tried to grow my hair out a bit for this episode because I'm starting by talking about nonsense, long-haired, spandex, people that were invested in how fast their fingers could play a guitar fretboard. But we'll come on to that because I've kind of digressed already. I play the guitar. And this episode, by the way, it's usually fueled by tea, but today, and I've already had a few too many to be fair, but today we're going to continue to be fueled by Foster's, the Amber Nectar. And when I drink lager, or any drink really, someone will say, oh my God, you're drinking Foster's, or oh my God, insert beer here. But, I mean, it might be interesting one day maybe we'll do it as a podcast one day, like a blind taste test. Just line up a load of lagers, ones that are supposed to be good, ones that are supposed to be bad, and we'll see how your old Mercurial number 6 does in differentiating price from taste. Price from taste. But I play the guitar, and I've always played the guitar, apart from one moment where I was playing keyboard. But I was a kid then, and I was playing Give Me a Channel of Your Peace in a church on a Casio keyboard. I wasn't playing the keyboard to make it sing. I was actually playing just the piano notes. Ding, 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 ding. I didn't sing along. Probably wouldn't have had the confidence to sing along then. Now, do you know what? If you told me I had to go into a church right now and sing Give Me a Channel of Your Peace, I'd be nervous. Because I think still the number one thing that makes, I read this recently, the number one thing that makes the population of the planet Earth more nervous than anything else is public speaking. And I would assume from that we're also talking public singing, like give me a channel of your peace in a church. But people would rather not, well, no, sorry, which way round is this? They'd rather play Squid Game in real life than sing give me a channel of your peace to some old ladies in a church. That's where we've got to. But I play the guitar. Oh, never breathed down drink. You've got two pipes, the trachea and the esophagus. I'm just guessing at those names. Probably got those wrong. But you've got those two names for a reason. Two pipes for a reason. Just like John Lennon said, give peace a chance. And I think Paul McCartney was always talking about pipes of peace. There are two pipes for a reason. That's the Mercurial number 6's advice to you. There are two pipes for a reason. But I play guitar. I always played guitar. I was attracted to the guitar. I appreciated other instruments. I very much appreciated the drums. And as I spoke about in episode 1 of this amazing podcast series, the only podcast you will ever need. You can't say the only podcast you'll ever need, because that eliminates the letter I need to say TOPYWEN. So think about it. But I listened to Iron Maiden, Nickel McBrain. I was, in my teenage years, very much into Led Zeppelin. I think in my era, in my youth, I think every teenage rocker was into Led Zeppelin. There was something about that band. There was like a mystique. And they had a live video called The Song Remains the Same. It was a bit of a strange concert video. It's actually, apparently, the actual music on it is a little bit derided by critics. I didn't realise this at the time. I was held, pardon me, blimey, Foster's, the Amber Nectar. I always held the music in very high regard. But the actual form factor of the concert, of the video, it was interspersed. Each band member had a different section attributed to them. So Jimmy Page, I don't know if you don't need to know. You can be a hip hop fan and still listen to this, all right? It's not a problem. But Jimmy Page had a guitar solo section where he was doing his nonsense with a violin bow, and for his section he was climbing a mountain to meet, I think, the Lord of Time at the top of the mountain, which I think it was himself. It was a kind of prisoner, Patrick McGowan type experience. John Paul Jones, the bass player, was, I can't remember what he was doing, riding around on a horse, I think. Robert Plant was messing around with his kids. I don't mean in a Jimmy Savile type manner, I just mean literally messing around with his kids. John Bonham was just driving ridiculous-looking high-powered cars and going to the pub. But John Bonham, I mean, I said John Bonham there. That's what happens when you drink the amber nectar. The ambidextrous nectar, you start to call John Bonham, who's one of the sort of most hard-playing, hard-hitting drummers of all time, you start calling him John Bonham, which obviously isn't his name. But he had a drum solo. It's on an album as well, Moby Dick. And he used to play it live, and on The Song Remains the Same, which is a Led Zeppelin concert video, he went on and on playing this drum solo, and he plays it with the sticks, and he plays it with his hands, and he just sort of shows off, really. It was the era of the drum solo, and I think it's an era that's probably best left for the past. However, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a rock band, a big rock band that doesn't have a little bit of a drum solo going on. I flirted, not sexually, but I flirted with the idea of drum solos in some of my bands. You need a decent drummer for a start. That's one thing. You'll notice that bands with shit drummers probably don't have drum solo sections in their concerts. But I watched John Bonham play and Nickel McBrain play, and I was attracted to the drums. Again, not sexually. Oh, I don't know. They're quite a sexual instrument, I suppose, if you enjoy taking a beating. But Jean-Michel Jarre, I had a friend at school who was always trying to, he knew I was a rocker, but he was always trying to convince me to listen to Jean-Michel Jarre. And weirdly, back then, I listened to it and I thought it was okay, but he didn't. And this was the time that he was trying to get me to listen to Jean-Michel Jarre was around the same time. I remember I was trying to get him in return to listen to Basket Case by Green Day. So that's the sort of era we're talking. But he was into Jan Hammer and Jean-Michel Jarre and probably Vangelis and people like that. All the sort of people that I didn't exactly frown upon at the time. because I didn't really understand it. But again, like I said in episode 1, with age comes great responsibility. So you can be a rocker and a punk rocker and an indie kid. You can listen to hip hop or whatever, but there will come a time in your life where you start to listen to jazz. You start to listen to Tangerine Gene. That's the David Bowie album that never was, Tangerine Gene. Jean-Michel Jarre. You listen to those albums and you realise that how much you missed out on while you were just trying to look cool with an electric guitar, which is probably pretty much where we're going with this particular episode of this podcast. I gravitated to the guitar. Honestly, I truly mean this. It's like the guitar had the gravitational pull of Jupiter or the sun, whereas other instruments only had the pull of a small moon. That's not a small moon. That's a space station. That kind of pull. And so I appreciated, like I was saying, other instruments. Apart from, at the time, the saxophone. I hated the saxophone when I was a kid. Strange one, because the people that considered themselves kind of musos, and I sort of do that with my fingers as I say it, musos when I was at school. In fact, actually the same person who I've talked about before, who returned his Eric Clapton Unplugged album because there was too much an audience noise on it. But the saxophone was held in quite high regard by those people. To me, it was a bit, I just didn't like the sound of it. You could have sent me to hell, and that would have been sitting, even in a comfortable armchair, to be fair, listening to a saxophone in my left ear and a bagpipes in my right ear. But I did appreciate instruments. I appreciated music, but the guitar had the pull of the sun. And the guitar is sex. Now, I appreciate that might seem a weird thing to say, and some of you will never understand. There's probably a whole set of Mercurial mercenaries right now who joined kind of after the Kanye West videos, and when I've been listening to Kendrick Lamar and Danny Brown and everything, that may not even truly appreciate what playing a guitar means. I've seen people playing guitars in that environment, in that arena, and it's kind of an occasional instrument. But I come from a background of rock music where the guitar was everything. And as far as instruments go, the guitar is sex. And I want people who come from the hip-hop world, who aren't sort of affiliated with the notion of having to admire the electric guitar, I want you to just imagine you're me for a second. Obviously you won't be as cool as me, but just imagine you're me. The guitar is sex. Other people historically have said that area of kind of musical passion is reserved for the saxophone. The saxophone is sex. Well, I want to disagree with that notion. I want to put forward the notion that the guitar is sex. The guitar is curvy. The guitar has curves. It sounds a little bit odd to say, but the Coca-Cola bottle, the classic old school, before probably money-saving efforts, but the old school Coke bottle was also sex. So you can see what, guitars, Coca-Cola, sex, all together. It's messy. I'll give you that it's messy. So I grew up with posters on my wall in my bedroom. Other people of the day might have had Wendy James from Transvision Vamp. Women in general, Bananarama, whatever. I had a poster on the wall of Jimmy Page's Song Remains the Same era. Well, all of his eras really, because he used it all the time. But his Les Paul. I think it was an 58 or 59, like a 1959 Les Paul on my wall. I also had a poster of his Telecaster. I had a poster of Jimmy Page, to be fair, a massive, great poster of Jimmy Page in his kind of flared dragon trousers. And I don't say dragon trousers like he was a kind of like, you know, mother of dragons type of thing, just a cool looking. No, I mean trousers with dragons embroidered into them. This was the 70s. So I had pictures of guitars on the wall. The sheer beauty of the curves of a guitar. So when I say guitar is sex, I want you to equate. Go and Google it now, right? Go and Google like a 1958 Les Paul Standard, right? And look at the shape of that body. It's got curves. Coca-Cola-esque curves. And now go and Google Marilyn Monroe from like 7 Year Itch era. That's a film, 7 Year Itch. That's the film where there's a bloke who's married. I think he's married with kids. And his wife and the kids go off on holiday, leaving him at home. And he lives in a flat. And the minute the wife and the kids leave, a woman moves into the flat above. The woman happens to be Marilyn Monroe. And he's been married for 7 years. And the woman living upstairs, the new woman living upstairs, drives him crazy. And this is the film where Marilyn Monroe, in that white dress, stands above that grate. I think it's in New York. And the air of the subway train lifts her dress up. It's that classic, the most classic Marilyn Monroe pose, the most classic Marilyn Monroe photograph. Marilyn Monroe, at that moment where the air comes up and her dress goes up and she goes, oh, and puts her hands into her groin. She is a Les Paul. She is a Les Paul. A beautiful sunburst Les Paul. Les Pauls are sex. Guitars are sex. As I look around my studio right now, I've got a butterscotch bass guitar. I mean, it's a bass guitar. I know, different, allegedly different instrument, but a butterscotch bass guitar. And I remember the day I bought that, the day I got it, I said to people, just look at this. Just look at it. Butterscotch. Just look at it. And people just look, yeah, okay. Your average person just looks across and goes, yeah, what's wrong? And I go, look at it. This is sex. And they just look at me like I'm an idiot. But you remember, you're me at the moment. Remember I told you you've got to pretend you're me? I've got a Telecaster right in front of me, Telecaster Deluxe. Those of you that don't understand your guitars, doesn't matter, but it's got a humbucker on the neck pickup. Slightly Les Paul-y. But it's, again, it's sex. Sounds a bit erotic and dirty talking like that. And when you know that I'm just talking about pieces of wood. But that's the thing. The guitar attracted me with the power, with the gravitational pull of the sun. Other instruments came and went. And I still to this day have the ability to plinky-plonky my way across various instruments to produce the sound I need to produce. But when it comes to the pull of an instrument that makes me who I am, it's gently caressing my Les Paul or my Telecaster with the knowledge that there somewhere in the wood grain is a beautiful woman with a dress blowing upwards who's probably sucking off a dead president. But we don't talk about those things, my mercenaries. I have a YouTube channel, funnily enough, called the Mercurial number 6. And I started that channel in early, I don't have to be obtuse about it, in March 2015. And one of the things that fired me up in the early days and made me kind of create the channel was there was something called the Tonewood debate. Now, this will certainly pass the youth of today by, and hip-hop heads have no reason to be concerned with it at all, and I'm not going to dwell upon it now. But what happened was there was talk on YouTube of people talking to camera, and people chose to talk to camera about whether, you won't believe this, people chose to talk to camera about whether the wood that an electric guitar is made out of has an influence on its amplified sound. Now, we're not going to dwell too much on that at all. And the upshot was some people said that as it's an electric guitar with strings vibrating and being picked up by magnets and creating an electric signal, the wood can't have any effect. And they would point to guitars that aren't made of wood, aluminium guitars, acrylic guitars, guitars that were kind of built on steel frames. And other people said, of course, the wood affects the sound of the guitar because the guitar's made of wood. So therefore, the thing you've got in your hands is the guitar. Of course, it's going to affect the sound. And funny enough, the reason we're here today, my mercenaries, is because I thought that was quite an interesting concept, so I got involved a little bit. But really, I suppose, what I took away from that was the fact that I just kind of enjoyed talking with a perceived audience, because that's what you have when you're doing YouTube videos. You kind of look at the camera and you imagine that on the other side of the glass, there's, in the early days, you imagine there's 10 people, and a little later on, you imagine you're playing to a crowd of 30, and then a little later on, you imagine you're playing to a club of 100 people in it. And I suppose if you ever got famous, which never happened to me, but if you ever got famous, you'd imagine you're playing to a stadium. But I think it's different with the idea of a podcast, with the idea that no one's watching. You know that someone's got headphones on right now, and they're listening to you directly injected into your brain. But that's where it started. And something I liked was, a few years later, Billy Corgan, who's the singer of the Smashing Pumpkins, who I was quite into in my youth, albums like Gish, and I forgot what the other one was called. It might have been called Siamese Dream, but the album with Today on it. Today is the greatest day I've ever known. Can't live for tomorrow. He said something quite interesting. Now, I don't remember the context, and he may have been joking, but I remember him being completely serious. But who knows? People always think I'm completely serious, my mercenaries, believe it or not. But he said the colour of your guitar influences how it sounds. He swore to God, he said, I might be paraphrasing here, and he might not have said this at all, but he said his red guitar sounds red. It sounds fiery and heavy. And his yellow guitar sounds yellow. His pink guitar sounds pink. His white guitar sounds white. He can hear the colour just in the paint applied to the wood. They can all be the same substance. They can all be the same wood, ash, mahogany, whatever. But the colour applied to the surface. And the guitar community, I remember at the time, the guitar community were laughing at him and mocking him and typing in comment sections and making videos. And I remember watching that, and the obviously, don't get me wrong here, right? Obviously, the correct reply to this is that's obviously bollocks, right? However, I knew exactly what he meant, because I too think my red guitar sounds red and my blue guitar sounds blue. And I would equate it with the way that I've talked about albums in the past. I've told you many times on the YouTube channel, obviously this is only episode 2 on the podcast, so you guys don't even know who I am. But Seventh Son of a Seventh Son by Iron Maiden. Google it. Google the album cover. That album has always sounded sky blue to me. It's always sounded sky blue. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West sounds red to me. It really honestly does. Because colour influences perception. So therefore, what's wrong with playing a red guitar and truly believing it sounds red? It probably does, because colour influences perception. You pick the red guitar up, it sounds red. If I blindfolded Billy Corgan and handed him one of his guitars and told him it was the red one, would he still think it sounded red? Probably. Even if it was the blue one. I used to practice the guitar a lot. First of all, in the early days, as I told you in episode 1, I would air guitar. Now, air guitar I've seen air guitar competitions on the telly, like on MTV and VH1 and that. People going absolutely mad and being judged on how amazingly they can pull off the appearance of playing guitar, or more the entertainment factor in watching someone pretend to play the guitar, with the tongue out and all that sort of Gene Simmons thing going on and the blood capsules. But I reckon, this is all off the top of my head, right? That's the thing. This isn't scripted, so that's why we've got a lot of bollocks, and it doesn't help that I'm drinking Foster's either. But I reckon playing the air guitar helped when I eventually had to play on stage for real, because I think this is to the core of my being and to the core of my understanding of music and my enjoyment of music. I think being able to convey something, to be able to convey an emotion, to be able to convey enjoyment, to be able to transmit what you're feeling with power, is more important than being able to play, to be able to truly play. Now, you need to play to a fundamental level. There comes a level. I mean, this isn't. There are still musicians out there, and there have been bands out there who can even convey emotion without being able to play to a fundamental level, and people still love them. And there's probably bands that I could probably think of now that might fit into that category. But once you get past the point that you can play to the point where you can sound like you know what you're doing, after that, I'm not sure it matters that much. I think after that, it's all about just being able to make people feel something. That can be done with technical know-how, musical knowledge, technical virtuosity. Steve Vai, who's I always sort of hold up there as probably this is a tricky one. I was about to say the greatest guitar player ever. I don't really mean that at all. But Steve Vai, in terms of if you had to pick somebody who knows his technical stuff, bearing in mind I only own like 2 albums by him. But if you had to pick someone who knows his stuff, it's Steve Vai. Steve Vai, for those of you not in the know, is the guitar player on the film Crossroads. Not the TV sitcom with the shaky walls that Victoria Wood parodied in Acorn Antiques. But the film Crossroads, which starred the Karate Kid. Remember that? It starred the Karate Kid and... I can't remember who the girl was now. No Research. This podcast could have been titled No Research. But it was a film where a classically trained guitarist meets up with an old blues player, and he sold his soul. The old blues player had sold his soul. They want to go back to the crossroads and meet the devil again and win his soul back. And in that film, at the end, Steve Vai doesn't play the devil, but he plays kind of the devil's guitar player. So Google that. Google Steve Vai in Crossroads. It's quite amazing. The guy can really play. But I don't think you'll find many people listening to Steve Vai albums to move them, to make them feel something to the core of their being. But even Steve Vai, when you've listened to a song like I forgot the name of it. For the love of God, for the greater love of God, for the love of God. So there you go. You know, in the show notes, I should put a clip from Crossroads, and I should also put for the whatever the song is I'm thinking of, which I can't remember the name of, something like For the Love of God. But after the air guitar playing, there was a point where I had to learn my craft and I had to practice. And I was one of those self-taught guitar players. The sort of guitar player that I realised later in life when I met these sort of virtuoso guys who had either gone to guitar institutes or had taken music lessons, kind of frowned upon the self-taught guitar player. Because what does self-taught mean? It usually means you couldn't be asked to get a teacher. But there's also something to be said for being self-taught. It just means you sit in your bedroom and your want, your need to learn the guitar fuels you. You just listen to albums, you play along, you get guitar magazines, and you read the guitar tablature, the musical notes, and you pick up ideas, you read how to play chords, you do read. I mean, self-taught does mean that you're taught by books and magazines, but you didn't have YouTube. It was pre-internet back in my day. To be self-taught today is a lot simpler. You can just load up Rob Chapman videos and fill your boots. But I remember there was a local band around the time that I started playing live who we occasionally ran into, far heavier band. They were a death metal band. And I remember reading in the local press an interview with a guitar player. And he was saying how I don't think he had a job, but I think he explained, he was quite proud to say he spent 9 hours a day practicing his guitar. 9 hours a day. And he did that every day, now 9 hours a day. Now, that's a shame, really, because he may well have been a great guitar player. I don't know. I've only watched him a couple of times. But your average general public, when they listen to a death metal band, which is like a really heavy music, they're not necessarily going to hear 9 hours a day. You know, when you listen to a guitar player, can you hear 9 hours a day? Can you hear it in the playing? Sometimes you can. I think if you listen to Steve Vai, you can hear 9 hours a day. If you ever listen to me, you'd hear, 1 or 2 hours a day. So it's definitely there. But we still come back to the fact that I was practicing a lot. All my spare time, I was practicing the guitar, playing the guitar, bashing out chords. I read that interview and I envied him for a moment. I thought, wow, that's real dedication. And dedication is what you need. 9 hours a day, every day, 9 hours a day. But I go back to my kind of mantra, my recurring thoughts, which are, can you hear that someone put 9 hours a day in every day for years? Maybe. Does it move you? Because the annoying thing is, from his point of view, the annoying thing is someone who puts in 9 hours in their lifetime can accidentally move you. And if they can meaningfully move you, wow, they've got something. You could listen to a song by that band 9 hours a day. And then you could listen to Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division. And the technical virtuosos, the people who have really learned the Lydian and the Phrygian and the Mixolydian and the Megalaudian and the Demi-Visigothian, I kind of need to know whether they can listen to Love Will Tear Us Apart. And I don't not just appreciate it, but I wonder if it moves them. I was practicing a lot too. Guitar, for a while there, music and guitar and listening to music was my life. And certainly in the early days, forever, really, but certainly in the early days, I was a rhythm guitar player. Now, I've got to say this now because there'll be people out there who still keep going. I mean, okay, this is an episode dedicated to talking about the guitar. So if you don't play the guitar, it's a little bit, but you can still listen. A rhythm player plays the rhythm, plays chords. A rhythm player plays more chords and tries to keep the beat. And okay, you might say, surely the drummer should be keeping the beat. Well, on the whole, the drummer's responsibility is to keep the beat. You do get drummers that don't keep the beat. Keith Moon played to the guitar. And you'll find that Pete Townsend, the guitar player of The Who, actually kept the beat. And I've been in bands, certainly, where if you speed up, as a bass player or as a guitar player, if you speed up, the drummer would speed up with you. He wasn't keeping the beat. He was following the guitars, following the other instruments. And one thing I think that's come with age, not sexually, is the idea of holding the beat. When I was younger, playing the guitar, creating songs, certainly in my bands when we were playing live, we would naturally speed up. I was in a studio once with a producer, and at the time I was in a band that played with a metronome, with a click track, and that's basically a ticking of a clock. You can change the speed of it, but a ticking of a clock. There's lots of reasons to play along with a click track. Ours at the time was because I was layering in sequence instruments. But the producer said there was only one drummer he'd ever met where the drummer could be playing to the click track, you know, and that the producer could just switch the volume of the click track off and let the drummer play, and then bring the click track back in, and the drummer would still be dead on. He said he only ever met one drummer. Well, I think over my time playing live, in my own bands I'm talking about, I think I might have met one who can do that as well. But on the whole, in your youth, and people in bands will find this, in your youth, the tendency is there to speed up. And with everyone with youthful zest, with the whole band speeding up, most songs will end, if you're not playing to a click track, most songs will end faster than they started. Again, not sexually. And sometimes that can be used to great effect. I mean, a song like Common People by Pulp speeds up. I think Stairway to Heaven, maybe. There are songs out there, lots of songs out there, especially songs that were recorded before click tracks and metronomes were routine. And what that gives is a sense of urgency. Some songs benefit from speeding up, but on the whole, it's frowned upon. And what I've found over time is that today, and people comment on this on my YouTube channel, I do reaction videos where I'll put on an album and I'll talk about it over the top, or I'll play instruments. I'm just trying to be generally entertaining over the top, which annoys some people, but on the whole, it's just the idea of putting on an album and having a communal experience. Back to that idea of looking through the glass and imagining there's a room of 1,000 people and we're all listening to the album together. But on that, there'll be a band and they'll be playing, and then they'll just stop for a break and they'll come back in. But during that stop, I'll carry on clapping. It could be a long stop. And when the band comes back in, I'm usually dead on the beat. And people will be like, how did you do that? And I don't think I could have done that in my youth. I think the ability to lay back and just accept that there is a rhythm in the air. Doesn't matter what the BPM is. It could be 120. Someone's texting me. Apparently I cooked the wrong meal tonight. What was I saying? Rhythms in the air. BPMs exist all around you. And all you've got to do is latch onto them. They're everywhere, like radio waves. There's a 120 BPM, there's a 132, there's a 160. BPM, beats per minute. 120 beats per minute. That is the standard speed of modern music. 120 beats per minute. It's supposed to be a beat that sits well with the rhythm of the human heart. I may have just made that up, but that's what I believe. I probably read it somewhere. I don't think I invented that. But like I said before, with age comes responsibility, and it's the responsibility of maintaining a good speed, not sexually, or sexually. Maybe I do mean sexually. With age comes the responsibility to maintain a good rhythm, right? So remember that. Don't fret. We all fret when we get old. I mean, you might be like 18 now, looking at people in a club who are like 27, and you look across at them and think, oh, what's that old git doing in here? Woe, behold, woe beside, wherever the phrase is, anyone who's in their 30s in a club or 40s. But there'll come a time where you'll get on a bit, and you'll be like, oh, it might be, oh no, I'm 21 now. People my age will go, oh God, I wish I was 21, but no. Oh no, I'm going to hit 30. Oh no. But just understand that rather than fear it, and I need to be saying this to myself because I don't practice this myself. I fear it. But we've collectively not got to fear it, because with age comes good things. I can maintain a rhythm better than your Justin Biebers or whatever. I can. Shut up. But I primarily played rhythm guitar in those early days. Now, there might be another episode that concentrates on specifics of this theme when it comes to bands. But around that time, in my teenage years, when I was making songs in my bedroom on tape-to-tape cassette decks with my mates, there was a time when I joined what I considered a proper professional band, a drummer who could really play, a singer who could sing, a guitar player, a lead guitar player who could really play. And I was the rhythm guitar player in this band. And I suppose if you're looking for hogging the limelight, then you've got to be the singer or the lead guitar player in that kind of band. But I really enjoyed. Funny, it's only in hindsight that I'm saying this, but I really enjoyed my time as a rhythm guitar player in a band. And it really is in hindsight, because kind of life and everything about life took me eventually in a completely different direction. You know, eventually there'll be another episode, but eventually into singing and being the lead man in the band. But in hindsight, being the rhythm guitar player, I'd get on stage. I had long jet black hair. I had a padlock around my neck, kind of aping Sid Vicious. And I had my Les Paul, which, again, if you're not a guitar player, Google Les Paul. Google the Les Paul guitar and look how sexy it looks. And it's the same guitar Slash plays out of Guns N' Roses. And then again, if you're a hip-hop guy, you're not going to know that either. But I had the guitar on a strap. I was going to say strap on. I had the strap on. I had the strap on, not sexually, on the guitar. And I had it to its lowest, so it would go as low as it did, as low as it could. And then that wasn't low enough for me, because Slash would play it low, Jimmy Page would play it low. My heroes would play the guitar low, like physically low down. So I added a piece of string to get that guitar even lower. So I'd have it down by my knees. And the problem then is, you're trying to strum a guitar when it's that low. It takes all the finesse out of it. In fact, it's almost impossible to play a guitar that low to any degree of technical prowess. And in fact, if you watch someone like Slash, who has his guitar really low, whenever he needs to play something difficult, he will lift the guitar right up and usually points it skyward. if you watch the guys who really play, who can really technically play, they'll have the guitar up high. And I think it's just a fashion thing. In my day, having the guitar as low as you could play it was cool. These days, you can play your guitar up high, no one cares. But people, and probably no one cared in my day, but I played it low and I did look cool. I've looked back on some photographs. There wasn't many, unfortunately, at the time. Because mobile phones, smartphones weren't invented, cameras weren't on phones, the idea of videoing or photographing a gig, certainly videoing was out of the question. No one videoed gigs back then. But even photographing gigs, no one carried cameras around. So a lot of this era that I'm talking about is completely undocumented by videos or cameras. But I've seen a couple of pictures. I wish I had more. Oh, I wish I had more of my youth. It's funny, but that when you're young, you don't truly appreciate just how good looking you are. Unless you're really full of yourself. But if you're anything like I was, you never truly appreciate it. You look in the mirror, oh God, I look shit. Well, it's only when you get older and you look back at pictures of your youth and you think, oh my God, what was I thinking? I mean, okay, there's an element of, well, compared to now, but genuinely, I can't believe I look back at pictures of myself and I think, oh God, I looked great. I looked great back then. But I'd have my guitar slung low. I'd even wear like a leather jacket on stage. It was, I could, the thing is as well, don't tell anybody, right? But when you're the rhythm guitar player, and you still, don't get me wrong, you still need to be good. And my whole point is the rhythm guitar player is supposed to be like a clock, not a cock. Like he can be a cock, he can definitely be a cock, but like a clock. It's all about that rhythm. The rhythm is the guiding thing, hitting those chords, being a Malcolm Young out of AC/DC. But you could have a drink. You didn't have to remember any lyrics. You didn't have to remember any guitar solos. You just had to remember a few chords. So I would have a few lagers. I'd get up on stage. I'd look cool. It's only when you're sitting in a room shrouded by blue light, decades later, that you realise, shh. It's not time to be maudlin here. It's not time to be maudlin. But the lead guitar player in this band, he could play Van Halen solos. He was technically great. But you look across at him, and he might listen to this, all right? So I don't mean this in a nasty way. This is purely... but you look across at him and you think, oh my God, what do you look like though, mate? You don't look cool. But then, see, that's the thing, isn't it? And not every musician is like this, but I think that how you look is important with music. Some people will say, I don't care what the band looks like, as long as the music's good. They can look like whatever, as long as the music's good. But I always put the two things together. I put the two things together. Whether it was punk or indie or rock, there was an element of me that could forgive the music not being quite all of that, as long as it made me feel something, and especially if the band looked cool. So my question really is, has there ever been a cool lead guitar player? Because in my personal experience, those technical virtuoso guitar players, they're quite often so obsessed with the art, the form, that they just miss a bit of the drinking a few lagers, putting your hair over your face and playing your guitar so low that you can't play the bloody thing. Now they're up here playing it all brilliantly. So, I mean, I'm kind of joking here, aren't I? Obviously, because I'm just jealous, really. But yeah, there was something cool about playing rhythm guitar. Come on then, are there any cool lead guitar players? I suppose the bands that only have one guitar player, your Led Zeppelins and your Van Halens and that, and Nirvanas, and my band, where you where the guitar player plays everything. I'm not really including those guys, your Jimi Hendrixes and Van Halens. I'm talking about the bands that had a lead guitar player. I mean, Slash was quite cool, wasn't he? He was lead guitar. Then again, if you had to say who the coolest person in Guns N' Roses was, this is for the rock crowd now. The hip hop crowd are like, what's this old bloke talking about? Izzy Stradlin, the rhythm guitar player out of Guns N' Roses in the early days. Yeah. I remember when he quit Guns N' Roses and he had an album, Izzy Stradlin and the Juju Hounds, and there was a cover on it, Pressure Drop. That was good. So there you go. That's your question. Is there a cool lead guitar player? I've just answered it, haven't I? Slash. Actually, Joe Perry out of Aerosmith. Actually, thinking about it now, there are loads of cool guitar players. Don't know what the hell I was talking about. Shut up. Yeah. The time before the internet. That's an interesting one. The era that I'm talking about, everything I've spoken about so far, rhythm guitar and creating my own songs and strapping the guitar on, not sexually, so low. This was an era before the internet. And it was an era where... See, now I realise now that guitar players back in the day still knew their stuff and still knew their guitars and their amplifiers and their pedals. You only have to look at any professional band from the time. They knew what they were doing. But weirdly, I came from a place where we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And I had a guitar because it looked good. I had a Les Paul because Jimmy Page had one and Joe Perry had one. The bloody thing didn't stay in tune. Terrible choice. Telecaster all the way. Telecaster is the greatest guitar ever invented. And when I was in a band that I really made a go of, the Telecaster was my primary instrument. But I didn't know what I was doing. I bought a Les Paul because it looked good. I bought a Marshall 4x12 cab because it looked good, because that's what everyone had that I watched music videos, watched live gigs. A Marshall 4x12. A Marshall is the company that makes speaker cabinets for electric guitar players. And a 4x12 just means it's got 4 12-inch speakers in it, which guitar players just take. That's the norm. Yeah, 4x12. Think about that for a minute. Think about that. Anyone, you hip-hop heads now, right? Think about that. I was playing a guitar through a wooden cabinet with 4 12-inch speakers in it. 4 12-inch speakers. Now, when you watch rock gigs from that era, from the 70s and the 80s, you'd see the band playing in front of walls of these Marshall 4x12 cabs. The fact is, for a lot of those gigs, those cabs probably weren't plugged in. They were just there for show. But I had a Marshall 4x12 cab because that's what people had. I had an orange 100, well, it's just down there. I'm sitting right in front of it right now. In fact, I've got an orange. I used to play through an orange 120 watt amp head. Doesn't sound a lot of wattage, but guitar players will understand. That thing on full through 4 12-inch speakers had enough power to destroy a suburb of a city. Honestly. And guitar players will know what I'm talking about now. The fact that I couldn't put the master volume even up to 1 says it all. But in hindsight, I can see that's a complete lack of knowledge. A Les Paul 120 watt orange overdrive head through a 4x12 Marshall cab was overkill for pretty much every gig I ever played. There were a couple of like concert arena sized gigs that I did that maybe you could justify it, but on the whole, ridiculous. If I could rewind time, I'd just take a Fender Twin Reverb out, for you guitar players who know what I'm talking about. Even that's too loud. Right now, it's funny, isn't it? With the internet, with the internet, you'd understand today. You could research it. You could watch one of the myriad of guitar channels. You could understand. You could learn. You could know what you're doing. But I didn't have a clue. My first few sort of demo tapes and early songs that I produced and put onto tapes, and we sold them at gigs and things. I had a particular guitar sound because the first guitar pedal that I ever bought was a phaser. And a phaser's got a sound. It phases through the frequencies. It's hard to sort of describe on a podcast, but it goes. The frequencies will be like, this is bassy, 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 trebly, 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 bassy, 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 trebly, trebly. So if you imagine a note played on the guitar, like, but more like, no, that's not it at all. Well, okay, can't really do it with the human voice. But I bought that pedal because it was green. It was green. So I bought it. So an arbitrary, stupid decision like, oh, look, I think I need a pedal because people have pedals when they play guitars. I'll have that green one. So I had a phased guitar sound for a few years just because I bought a green pedal. And it was similar to my eventual sound that, because this, we're nearing the end now because I'm getting to a conclusion here, right? I bought my orange 120 watt overdrive head, right? In the head, that's an amplifier, okay? So you have a guitar that goes into an amplifier, and the amplifier's connected to the speakers. It's like your jawbone's connected to your head bone, and your knee bone's connected to your thigh bone, and all that stuff. Probably got my anatomy completely wrong there. So I bought an orange. And this orange head, okay, we're getting technical again now because guitar players will understand and non-guitar players won't. But most guitar amplifiers have reverb built into them. Now, reverb is just, like, we can do this on the podcast, okay? So, ordinarily, an amplifier with no reverb is very dry, just like we are right now talking, right? But what people want to do is create the sound of a room, of being in a room. So we'll do this now, right? Let's start talking in a small room. So this is the sound of reverb, an effect being applied to my voice to make it sound like we're in, just to give the ambience and the reflections off the walls of the sound waves of being in a room. So it's not so dry and radio. Let's switch that off. So it's not so dry and radio announcer style. This is just dry. This is what you're striving for, I think, when you're doing a radio broadcast. Put it back on again. And this is just the sound of being in a room. And you can vary this. This is a room. We can now be in a bigger room. We can now be in a hall. And then we can now be in a cavern. And let's switch it off. So what you're trying to achieve with a guitar amplifier is just a nice, pleasant sound, and you tend to have a little bit of reverb on your sound. But the orange head, my orange 120 watt overdrive head, doesn't have built-in reverb. And I thought, no, I need reverb because I knew a few things in life. I'd had a guitar amp before the orange amp. I'd had a Marshall valve state, which was like a little built-in, like a little amplifier and built-in speaker combo thing. That had reverb. I liked the sound of reverb. I thought I needed reverb. Everyone has reverb. Reverb's a necessity. Reverb's a necessity. So I went back to the shop and I said, I need to have some reverb. And they sold me this little Zoom unit, this little digital Zoom unit that had lots of effects on it, but it had reverb. And I used it on my amplifier. You don't need to really think about this, but it's got an effects loop on it. Don't worry about it. I used the Zoom unit with my amplifier. And it didn't work. And because I was naive, I couldn't work out why it wasn't working. Today I think I could. Anyway, don't worry about it. I was naive. And I went back to the shop and I said, I don't really know it. And the guy said to me, oh yeah, that Zoom won't work with that orange amp. They just don't. No, it won't work with that. And he just sold me instead. He said, oh, this will give you a similar sound. And he sold me an old Boss DM100 delay box. from like 1980. And yes, right, delay is similar to reverb. In fact, reverb is delay. Reverb's just a myriad, thousands of delays to sound like sound waves coming off all the walls. But delay is just a single delay. A delay is an echo. So let's just put a delay on my voice now. Let's put like one single repeating delay on my voice now. Delay is an echo. And you can have different types of delays. We could put let's put a stereo panning delay or something on my voice right now. You can have different types of delays. But even though I'll turn it off again. Even though a delay, in essence, if you have enough delays, becomes reverb, a delay is not reverb. So I kind of realised this, that the delay was a slightly unusable effect. It's great on guitar solos, and it can be used in loads of different ways. But on a rhythm guitar, certainly with the knowledge I had back then, it was difficult to incorporate the delay. This box also had a chorus effect on it. You could switch between it. You couldn't have both. You could have one or the other. You could have delay. Let's just do it now, right? So let's put the delay on. You could have delay, or you could have chorus. Now, I've got the chorus on my voice now, hopefully. A chorus is kind of like the name suggests. It's a way of phasing the notes, the voice, the sound of the guitar slightly, just to sound like it's kind of like there's a chorus of people, a chorus of notes. They're all very similar. If you're into guitars, like flanges and phasers and chorus, all very similar frequency related effects. But the whole point of this long, lengthy, dreary conversation is because through sheer incompetence and lack of knowledge and no internet and no knowledge apart from what I had in my hands. I had a guitar, I had an amplifier, I had this box. My sound, from that point onwards, through all the bands that I was in, and the only sound I ever used, well, I can elaborate on it maybe in another video, but my primary sound was a reverbless, chorused guitar sound. Now, if you had to decide on a guitar, if you had to pick a guitar sound with knowledge and with the internet and be able to look at all the myriad of pedals and amplifiers and everything available to you, you're never going to decide on a dry, chorused guitar sound. And yet that was my guitar sound. So through sheer accident, we had a unique sound live. And sometimes, I truly believe this, sometimes your favourite band or artist sounds like your favourite band or artist by mistake, by accident, by sheer fluke. People stumble upon things. The reason you like a certain band, something that you grasp and think, oh, that's amazing, that's great. If you asked them, how did you come up with that? You might be really disappointed when they say, just by accident, mate. Just fluke. I don't know. That'd be a good answer, wouldn't it? You get to meet your favourite artist. You get to meet your Drake or your Taylor Swift or your Ed Sheeran or your Kanye West. And you get to say, Kanye, how did you come up with that sound? How did you think of that effect? How did you come up with that album? What happened? And the answer might be, don't know. That's it. I don't know. I think we'll end there. Just with, Mercurial number 6, episode 2 was absolutely fantastic. What a fantastic, passionate Mercurial warfare. It was fantastic. Where did you get the idea for that? For that flurry, that sheer, off the wall, just flurry of thoughts. Spontaneous thoughts. Where did you get it from? Don't know. Until next time. over and